Of course, racial bias extends far outside the justice system. In fact, more than 50 cities and towns, including ours, Boston, have passed legislation or formally declared racism a public health crisis, along with Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. And earlier this month, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts introduced a bill that would classify systemic racism as a public health crisis in the U.S., because the fact is, black people in our country have a shorter life expectancy than white people, more than a decade shorter in some areas, and generally have worse overall health. And the pandemic has only exacerbated these inequities, with African Americans nearly 3 times more likely than white people to contract COVID-19 and twice as likely to die from it. So while there's no easy solution to such a massive gap, one thing medical experts say needs to happen now is recruiting more black people for coronavirus vaccine trials, which pharmaceutical companies have not done well so far. In a New York Times op-ed, the presidents of 4 historically black universities and medical schools argue, quote, the paucity of diversity in these clinical trials creates problems on 2 fronts, treatment and trust. I'm joined now by one of those 4 authors, Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice. She's the president of Morehouse School of Medicine. Doctor, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this may be obvious, but let's get this out of the way. Why does adequate representation matter in these vaccine trials?
You know, that is the $100,000 question, right? So if you think about the challenges that we have when you look at research already of getting people to enroll in trials, that's the challenge. But getting people to enroll in trials for the right reasons, and that is so that we can understand what the outcomes will be. And those outcomes will be predicated on who actually is enrolled. So if you have someone who enrolls in a trial who has a pre-existing condition and you have that intervention and you don't know what the outcome would be because of that chronic disease, then think about what that would do to the outcome of the study.
So where is the problem? Is it pharmaceutical companies that are doing the trials are not trying hard enough to reach out to a diverse population? Or are African Americans, based on history, a really painful history, just cynical about those things and saying, I don't want to be part of this thing? Where does the problem lie?
I think it's a combination. So let's first address the issue of, is it an issue based on the history? As you know, there's a lot of data now that does show, whether you're looking at the Henrietta Lacks story or the Tuskegee syphilis study, or you look all the way back from Marion Sims, who was considered the godfather of gynecology. We know that he used African American women slaves as part of the subjects for his development of the repair of the vesicovaginal vesicovaginal fistula. And doing that, he did that without their permission. So those stories have lived on and on. So first of all, it's about trust. Do you trust that your engagement with me as a person who's doing the research, that I actually do have your best outcome in mind when I'm asking you to engage? So first is trust. And then secondly, with the pharmaceutical companies, they are committed to getting the trial done. And sometimes I think that they are naive to understanding that there are outcomes that will be different based on the challenges that people have when they come to the table, or the value that they have when they come to the table.
Can we deal with the first part of the problem, the trust? I have to say, I don't know how you build that trust. I mean, let's just look at recent news. You know this better than I. We saw a study that black newborns are 3 times as likely to die as white newborns if treated by a white doctor. Go back a couple of years and we saw that horrifying study where white residents, a huge number of white residents, said they thought the skin of African Americans was thicker, the pain threshold was higher, the kind of stuff that you get from lunatic conspiracy theory people. Mm-hmm. With that recent history melded to the older history that you described a minute ago, Doctor, how do you convince African Americans in this country that they can trust to be part of these trials?
First of all, you have to have different messengers. Okay. So that's why it's so important that the historically Black colleges and universities like Morehouse School of Medicine have been asked to be enrollment sites. So we're going to be fully participating as a trial enrollment site for the study. Therefore, the community will see other persons who look like them, who may have some shared history. You build that trust by having diversity in the healthcare workforce and diversity in the people who are participating in delivering the engagement of the trial. The second thing, though, comes with education. And it's not just about educating the Black people, it's about educating the white people or the people who have not necessarily had some of the burdens that Black people have borne over the years that have built the mistrust. And so it's about education and having a diverse healthcare workforce to help people to feel comfortable that someone has their best interests at heart.
I want to talk about that diverse workforce in a second, but just put up where this lack of trust plays out, not just in the trials, but in taking the vaccine. An Axios Ipsos poll from late August asked people across this country the likelihood of getting the COVID-19 vaccine when it was available. Whites, 51%, Hispanics, 56%, blacks, half that number, 28%. I know you were really focused on diversifying the healthcare workforce. I know that Michael Bloomberg has given $100 million to several facilities, including yours. You did an interview, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, I'm not sure where I read it, which was shocking to me, that 158 medical schools, and you said a large number of those schools don't even have one African-American male, where there's an even greater shortage than amongst African-American females, not even one in their first year class. I only have a minute or so left. Is this something you can turn around in short order, or is this like a generational task?
So, first of all, the pipeline is leaking, whether it's at high school graduation rate or whether it's college graduation rates, and then the amount of counseling that those young men get when they don't do as well the first time they take the MCAT. We know that they are 50% less likely to take the test again. So those are the things that we can do to really make sure that if we improve the counseling, improve high school graduation rate, all of those things will make a difference to having more people in the pipeline. But then when they get into medical school, they have to have a learning environment that is receptive to them being there so that people see their value. And so we are challenged with this, but we have 150 so medical schools. And if everybody became more intentional in saying that I know that there are some requirements of MCAT and GPA, but we can take academically diverse students and they can be successful. Morehouse School of Medicine has less than a 2% attrition rate, and 85% of our students are African American. That means that 98% of them walk across that stage in an average of 4 to 5 years, and that is success. And we take academically diverse students.
I'll tell you, you have a pretty full agenda and a difficult agenda, but I wish you luck in all of it. And it's really good to meet you, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time.
I thank you for being here. And the last thing I would just say, if we figure out how to meet communities where they are, if we engage them with an openness and being willing to answer their questions and to say to them, hey, I see you for what you bring to the table, I think we can solve a lot of these problems.
Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, perfectly said. Good to see you. Be well.
Thank you.